Welcome back to On Texas Football's Tuesday Night Longhorn Livestream presented by Andy Ludicky. I'm your host, Amanda Atwell, joined with CJ Vogel, and we have a special guest tonight filling in for Jeff Howell, Marcus Myers. Thank you so much for joining us. Should have a lot of fun today and some kind of breaking news to start us off. Unfortunate breaking news. A lot of comments about this already. Michael Taaffe with a surgery on his thumb. And CJ, you said this was something that he's been dealing with for a while now. This isn't anything new. So if you want to tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a re-aggravation to a thumb injury that he has had and dealt with dating back to really the back end of the 2023 season. He ended up having surgery in May of 2024. I got to see him working with Bernard Blake and Band Performance in the summer of 2024 as well, in which he had a cast on his hand. And look, he re-injured it against Kentucky. My guy Corey Mose did a great job kind of breaking this one down, so I'll give credit there. He said, look, very early in the fourth quarter against Kentucky, that's where the injury reoccurred. That's where really you see him come up, and there's a bit of a shake of the hand. He was able to play through the fourth quarter and all of overtime as well. That obviously goes to talk about just how tough Michael Taaffe is, but very unfortunate for the Longhorns. He's expected to be out this weekend. Obviously, Texas won't be likely will not have him against Vanderbilt. I have been told, however, that there is a in pencil circle right now for the Georgia game as the targeted return date for Michael Taaffe. That, of course, is November 15th. And look, if Texas can find a way to win this game this weekend and find a way to defeat Vanderbilt on November 2nd, look, there is your chances at achieving what you want to achieve this year, and you would likely get Michael Taaffe back for the final 3 games of the year. But right now, it's unlikely that Taaffe will be on the field for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, just a really unfortunate hit there. And with him out, what do you guys think? What do you think the move is here as far as just who's going to fill that role? Because obviously a very big part of this Texas defense. Fortunately, this Texas defense is pretty deep, though.
Yeah, I mean, you probably end up seeing a lot more Derek Williams, right? Like we'd been seeing him ramp up his play a bit more anyways. And so I think for some of that continuity, he's seen some pretty big games and seen the live bullets a decent bit, even in spite of his injury. So I think you see some more of him. I'll be interested when the report comes out on, who else we may have available to help kind of fill that role. But you certainly hope that he's able to step up and fill some of that void that Taaffe leaves.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting, too, because Derek Williams we didn't see a lot of Derek Williams at the very beginning of the year. He was getting about 5 to 10 snaps, and it was surprising because this was a guy coming back from his ACL. You were expecting, he'd be a big piece of this Texas secondary. He was back active in the spring, ramping up in the summer, giving it a full go in fall camp. And, that whole trajectory was, hey, if this was your best cover safety his freshman year, that's something that Texas would greatly use, right, and benefit from. But, credit to Jelani McDonald, and obviously, another year of Michael Taaffe. It's hard to get those guys off the field, but right now he's your third guy on the field. Will be interesting to see, just how Xavier Phil-Sami figures into this as well. He had kind of been moved back down into the slot, backing up Grayson Littleton as well. CB, I see your comment. When is Jonah Williams going to get significantly playing time? Look, it's a great question. It's one I wish I had an answer for. But just like anybody who has yet to prove it on the field for the staff, it's tough to get these guys on the field when Texas desperately needs to continue playing winning football and just not knowing if they can be trusted 100%. So it's hard to put, Jonah Williams in this starting lineup or play a significant role if you just don't know that right now, and it's kind of where things land.
Yeah, and on the injury front as well, I know we got the news that CJ Baxter potentially could be back this week. Not for sure. We'll find out more in the injury report tomorrow night. But I don't know if you've got any inclination about the O-line, Connor Stroh and Cole Hudson, about their return, if it's plausible for this week. Because I know that's one thing that a lot of people saw was the biggest struggle going into Kentucky.
Yeah, I don't know anything new on Connor Stroh. It doesn't sound like Cole Hudson will be back. Sark mentioned this week of practice would be great to have some more continuity of Connor Robertson and Nick Brooks working together. However, the expectation is that CJ Baxter does return. And Marcus, I know it takes an offensive line to run the football, but at the very least, you get a 6'2", 230-pound capable body and pass protection with Baxter returning to practice.
Yeah, man. If he's able to get back out there and contribute some solid minutes, I think that helps to take some of the wear and tear off of Trey, right? Like he's not the biggest guy, I wouldn't describe him as scrawny. I think I heard somebody say that at one point, somewhere in the watch with us. But I think he's a guy that you don't want to have to put that much on, because he is somebody that can be a game changer for us in the run game. So if you have someone that has some of that body armor already, if you will, that we've heard the coaches talk about at times, that could certainly be a plus. And then certainly in the passing game, and just from a leadership standpoint as well, someone to be out there and help a bit, pick the offense up when things are tough. Because listen, those cowbells are going to be rocking this weekend. And the noise is going to be something that the team is going to have to deal with. It's not something they're foreign to, but it's something they'll have to deal with. And so having a guy out there that has some experience and is a bit more comfortable in some of those pass pro settings would certainly help.
Mm-hmm. Even further than that, sorry, Amanda, to cut you off, but I talked with Arch a little bit on Monday. So, hey, man, like I talked to you at the Manning passing camp in June, and, your big focus was going out there and having fun, just playing the game that you love to play with the guys that you love to be around. And obviously through 7 games, it really hasn't been very fun for Arch, for this Texas offense, or for many of us that watch and dissect after games. And, I asked him, I said, how do you make sure that you still have fun in these games? And he said, look, I rely on a lot of the guys that are on this team. And he pointed out Michael Taaffe, obviously, who won't be on the field, but will likely travel the same way CJ Baxter does. And he said, there are 2 guys offensively that I lean on. It's Trey Wisner, who we've talked about, has been in and out of the lineup due to early injuries as well. And now CJ Baxter, who returns to the lineup. And that's a big piece, because I look back at what Quinn Ewers used to tell us at media availabilities. He would take the field, and in his ear would be Trey Wisner saying, you're a dog, go be a dog. You are the reason why we play. This is why our offense goes. Now, I'm not sure if Trey's telling Arch that. I would assume so. Arch is a little bit more quiet lip than even what Quinn was at this point in the year. But, to have a veteran leader like that, who's been around the program, who's been around Arch, has watched him blossom and grow behind the scenes, I think that's huge. So that's the little things. And who knows if it plays a factor at all on Saturday. But at this point, I'll take any win I can in terms of Arch playing and feeling like he's playing any bit better than he has been.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the biggest concerns for fans right now is the regression you saw from OU, and just kind of why did this offense change to where they're not playing complementary football anymore? They're not playing to their strengths, and certainly they were not playing to their weaknesses, which I think is key when you have this kind of O-line. So how is that something that can be rectified, especially when you're not getting back the offensive linemen that you've have a little bit more experience going into this week? Obviously, CJ Baxter returning would make a big impact, but how can you have confidence that this offense can potentially turn something around on the road again in a very hostile environment?
Well, they should be used to the road by now, right?
They haven't been home in quite a while.
I don't know. Marcus, go ahead, and then I got some ideas there.
Yeah, I think some of it goes to, and we were texting a little bit about this over the past couple of days, but like I really appreciated the fact that Sark took some accountability and flat out said, not only, hey, my bad, or, this was on me, but I should have done this, right? And some of should have done this has been what we've been talking about: run the ball. Right? Do a direct run, not just, something that's trying to be, full of tricks and things. And so doing some stuff to support the guys in a way that allows them to begin to build from play to play, because what you would still see is, sometimes something would get schemed up and the play wouldn't, get completed properly. Right. And so that can kill a drive. It can kill momentum. And then the next time out, it's lack of execution on that O-line. So I think, having some things in play, pressing a bit, allowing these guys to, really try and move some people in front of them a bit, I think can sometimes help, because we did see, in the very small sample size that we did run the ball against Kentucky, there was some success. We just didn't stick with it. Right. So I think honestly, a decent run game and just the ability to continue at it, even if it's, not immediately, these huge chunk games right off, can sometimes help an O-line begin to build some confidence. And then look, when you have an opportunity, to make a play, it's not only on the quarterback, but the receivers to help, make that happen. I think it's one of those situations where it's not any one issue, like we've talked about. It's multiple that are happening at any given time or every other play, every other series. And so just some more of that consistency, I think could help the O-line begin to gel a bit.
And that's what I'm really interested to see, how Sark evolves. And I gave him a lot of credit after the Oklahoma game. So, hey, that's some of the biggest adjustments that we've seen him make on a week to week, basically throwing away what he wants to do and saying, this is what we have to do. Now, he went back to what he wanted to do a little bit against Kentucky, and there were opportunities that Texas probably should have taken advantage of, right? We've talked about it with Arch. He missed some open receivers. But on top of that, I don't think you can give Arch and that passing game the benefit of the doubt moving forward. One, because you're in a do or die, but also because your offensive line has proven continuously that it won't allow you to do what Sark wants to do. So you have to play and call games the way that, you have to, right? And that's the short, quick game. That's basically the extended handoffs to the outside. That means, hey, if you're Chris Jackson, you got to get your guys to block on the outside. Texas hasn't done a great job of that right now, right? We've seen holding calls from Emmett Mosley, DeAndre Moore has one, Parker Livingston. Those guys have to be better on the outside. And it doesn't play to their strengths necessarily because, you don't have an Xavier Worthy, you don't have an Isaiah Bond, you don't have a Matthew Golden, a guy that can get that ball and go. But you do have a guy like Ryan Niblett, who Sark said they want to get the ball to more, and DeAndre Moore, who with the ball in his hands is, I would still say, very dynamic. So that's where you have to revert back to is, it wasn't pretty, right? You didn't have many explosives against Oklahoma, but you found ways to move the ball into field goal range or scoring position, and that's more than what you were able to do against Florida for most of your drives, and Lord knows it's more than what you were able to do against Kentucky as well.
Yeah, we got a lot more to talk about, including some familiar faces that we'll see coming up this weekend. But first, we hear from our first sponsor. Are you looking to diversify or new ways to make money? Andy Ludicky at myperfectfranchise.net can help you do just that by finding you businesses that will fit your time allotment and financial goals. Call him or email him to learn more. He's got a really cool process that identifies a perfect fit for you. Email him now at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. So this is a Mississippi State team that looks a lot different than the one you saw Arch actually light up last year against. The defense much improved, and there's some familiar faces on this team as well, some names that a lot of Longhorns will probably remember. Brennan Thompson, Darian Hewlett, and Jere Bledsoe. And Brennan Thompson specifically is one that's interesting to me. I think that he's their top receiver right now. So definitely a name you will hear on Saturday. But some of these other players, how do you think they're impacting Mississippi State currently? Just a completely rebuilt team, honestly.
Yeah, they are. They're more physical up front. They have larger humans up front as well. And look, Jere Bledsoe, pound for pound, was probably the most athletic player Texas had on its roster a year ago. And I know that sounds crazy, but around 6'2.5", 6'3", 295 pounds. This guy was doing backflips and back handspring. I mean, this guy was a freaky athlete. So now that he's gotten the chance to play some meaningful football, you've seen him grow and develop, week after week. He's grown into being one of their more important pieces up front. What's going to be really interesting, and Amanda, you mentioned it, Brennan Thompson's become basically a guy they cannot live without offensively. He has 29 receptions, 583 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's averaging close to 19 yards per reception. So big play threat waiting to happen. You go back to that Tennessee game, it was Brennan Thompson who went about 50 or 60 yards for the game tying or game forcing into overtime touchdown there. So he can go, and Texas fans should also be familiar with Anthony Evans. He was at Georgia a year ago. The two of them combined, I mean, that's two guys in a Jeff Levy offense with 10-2 speed. Find that anywhere else, it's going to be very difficult to do so.
Yeah, I would also just go back to Jere Bledsoe real quick. He's starting for them now. He's played in all 7 of their games. In all of his games, I think, but one, he's registered to tackle. And he's second on their team in TFLs. Tackles for loss, he has 3.5. And, when you flip that over to our roster, and granted, we do platoon a lot of guys on our D line, but only Colin Simmons and Brad Spence have more than 3.5 TFLs that Jere Bledsoe has. So definitely an athletic guy, someone that is disruptive and helps their defense out. So someone that he's probably seen some of these guys that he's going to go up against, right, and has a little extra juice in the tank to prove something on Saturday. So it'll be a good matchup to watch for sure.
Yeah, Marcus, we were talking about Darian Gillette a little bit before we got on air. That, again, we talk about freaky athletes. He was one of them, coming out of Marlin. I got to see him running track. He was 6'3", 225 pounds, running the anchor of the 4x2 in a spring track practice I got to watch. And, you said, funniest story, I mean, Ramon's Taylor's their track coach. And so I was able to chop it up with him. He said, man, this guy's a freak, and unfortunately, he had an ACL injury, which kind of derailed his start to Texas and his career here. But he's found a home after being dinged up a little bit at the beginning of the year here as well for Mississippi State.
Yeah, DJ Derek Johnson, of course, is helped out from time to time with some of the linebackers. Talk to those guys, and I remember when Gillette was here, I used to ask him always, former linebacker myself, I would ask DJ like, hey man, like, what are of the young guys, who do you think really has it? And he was kind of saying the same thing. If Gillette could get back from that injury, let the game slow down for him, he's the one that had all the physical traits. So, we'll also be interested to see, how he does. I think he was a little banged up some this year because in one of their games early on, I want to say against like Alcorn State or something, he led their team in tackles, but then missed a couple in the middle there. But I think he was back for the A&M game. So, again, it'll be some guys that we're familiar with, and be interesting to see how the guys perform.
They'll want to win this game.
I did see one interesting fact about Brennan Thompson earlier today. He is, I think, the only player who has played for both Texas and OU and won on each side of the Red River.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty, I got to say, I'm really happy he's not playing for OU currently, because, he seems to have kind of found his niche. I covered him when I was in Amarillo. He went to Spearman High School up there in the Panhandle, and he was a track athlete, just very, very fast, really, really good athlete. So he will definitely be wanting the win this weekend for sure. Marcus, you put in a couple little stats that are interesting here about Mississippi State. In 6 of their 7 games, they've scored first, and in 6 of their 7 games, they've led after the first quarter. Yep. Always something not fun to be trailing initially, right. But something that Texas is probably used to at this point, I would say.
Yeah, but kind of your points around the conversation of strengths and weaknesses, right? Like that's something that they've done pretty well, and the only game I think that they've trailed after the first quarter was the Tennessee game, and they took them to overtime. So, you don't want to give a team that is accustomed to that kind of start. So as strange as it sounds, I'd be even comfortable if we just draw even with them after the first quarter, if you're not able to get ahead, because we've seen that, we start a little slow. So, you want to be able to counteract that as best you can. And I know, ideally you would love to get a fast start on the road so that you can do a little bit to try to quiet that crowd. But I think, as we've seen in Kentucky and really in any of these environments, the further, you get into a game, the closer they are, the more confidence they get. So, as best you can do to try to snuff that out early, I think would go a long ways. But yeah, that's what their track record has shown to this point, that they start pretty fast. So you want to do what you can to, try to keep them from doing that.
Yeah. And if you're Texas, look, you have to find a way to limit possessions. I know that's difficult without a run game, but this is a team that will allow you to do that. Mississippi State right now, outside of the top 130 in terms of time of possession, just over 26 minutes a game. It's pretty poor. But again, Marcus, Amanda, we just watched Texas own time of possession for about 21 minutes against Kentucky. So how can they do that? How can they give their defense a breather and not force them to play 85 or 90 snaps once again? Because, look, that's going to add up in the second half. I don't know what the weather's going to look like this weekend, but I do know when you play fast and an Art Briles-esque offense that Jeff Lebby runs, that's a lot of running for your secondary, and that's a lot of run game that you're going to have to be asked to defend against with your front seven. So find a way to get them a break. It has to be a complementary football style of play this weekend, and that's been something that's been very hit or miss so far.
Yeah, I think the main question marks fans probably have going into this game is the offense, and how are they going to be able to stay on the field a little bit longer to give the defense that breathing room. We have a comment here from All Right Cubed, I think that's
good.
I want Sark. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, I get it now.
Oh.
Delayed reaction there. I want Sark to go completely against his nature, extreme simplification of the offense. What do you think about that?
So I imagine CJ is going to have kind of a similar thought because again, this goes back to like when you're trying to plug some holes in the boat, um, it's never seemingly the same thing from drive to drive, right? Like some of the plays that are being called, I don't think are all that complicated. A drag across the middle is not a supremely complicated route. Like yeah, it's great that you get some things going to where the defense is moving one way and the receivers coming the other way, but I mean, that's a perfectly schemed play, right? You had one against Kentucky where I think, CJ drove the ball to Moore for a completion. And then you follow that up with the great play call that could have hit injuries for another big gain, and it's behind him. So, again, it's hard for me at times. I certainly don't want to see another trick play as early as we saw it, and hopefully not at all. But, to some degree, like, I think what they're doing, there's possibilities to work it. And, again, we heard Sark kind of allude to, he didn't want to give it up, obviously, in any of his availabilities, but that you will likely see some changes on Saturday. And I imagine some of that will be making sure that the guys are very comfortable with whatever game plan they're going into. But when you talk about simplify, for me, I guess if simplify means run the ball, then, I'm all for that. Just run the damn ball. But beyond that, like, I don't know how much more simple you can get sometimes other than just expecting the offense to hold up long enough to complete a standard pass.
You got to at least try to run the football, right? Texas didn't even attempt to do that in the first half against Kentucky, right?
Agreed.
Trey Wisner had 2 rushes in the first quarter, and I think that was it until his 1-yard rush on the goal line after the Niblett return. So how can you establish the run if don't even try? The answer is you cannot. I actually have an interesting thought here, Marcus. I'd like to get your thoughts. Amanda, you let me know if I'm way off track as well. To extremely simplify this offense, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Because what's very simple about this offense? Well, it's you get beat up front. You need some window dressing, in my eyes, to not allow pass rushers or that interior to get a full head of steam right back at the quarterback, right? They need to be looking left and right, knowing, hey, misdirection might be underway right now. I was looking at it, and I charted it after this game. I had to go back and watch the Kentucky game about 3 times. So it's all for this stat. Yeah. It's all for this stat. But when Texas did not have motion on any of its snaps, they ran 55 snaps against Kentucky. 30 of them did not have any sort of pre-snap motion. And what I mean by that is there was not a guy in motion at the time of the snap. So what is that, about 55% of their snaps or so? They averaged 1.3 yards per play. They just lined up, said, let's play football. And that did not work. Now, it wasn't much better, but it was significantly better in terms of comparison to no motion with motion. And that was around 5.3 yards per play. So it's not the end-all, be-all, but you have to give that pass rush at least a little bit of hesitation. And that could just be, hey, a quick swing out to the right. Maybe we see the Texas offensive line chop at some defensive linemen this weekend. It's not in the nature of Kyle Flood or Steve Sarkisian to add that element, but you need something that stalls these guys from their get off to allow Arch just that little split second longer, because he doesn't have that right now, and he hasn't had it really the entire season. So if that's to be the case and Sark adds some extra trickery, some window dressing as we call it, I'd be for it, because that's just one more thing that these guys have to look around and say, okay, before I get after the quarterback, I got to check my box and my assignment before I can pin my ears back and really go. So that's, maybe it's a little bit of a little bit more confusion, I guess, is what I'm looking for with the offense, but keep it simple terms, I guess.
Yeah, I think my only thing to that, CJ, is something that Tony Hill said within the last week or two is sometimes when you have a younger offensive line, and again, now we're kind of getting into Rod's football theory world where he and Jeff kind of nerd out, right? It depends on what that motion is. If it's like a singular receiver, or sometimes you've seen, the back fake out and then start, going again. I think that is more in the realm of what we're talking. But what Tony discussed one morning was that when you do some of those major shifts pre-motion, well, now the defense is adjusting as well. And sometimes those younger offensive linemen, especially when they don't have the continuity, especially when you don't have a more veteran center in there,
Yeah.
now it may be a little harder for them to identify the mic. Now it may be a little harder for them to know who to pass off where. And so sometimes when you talk about that simplification, there are some elements of his offense I think maybe he's not dialing into, not because he wouldn't ideally want to, but again, even it's kind of like you're picking your poison, right? Like, do I want to just see if these guys can do it, to your point, and just line up and play some ball? Or do I potentially want to put even more strain on them and they might even turn somebody else further loose than we've already seen?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's chicken or the egg sometimes. And I think, hopefully the sweet spot is somewhere in between.
That's a good point. Yeah. And that's why we have you guys on, because that goes over my head too. I was just thinking, hey, just muddy it up for the other side, not knowing that, hey, they're going to adjust and move on the fly as well.
Oh God, no. They talked about my after dark appearance, CJ. So Amanda, CJ and I did some watch with us, and it was, I think, both of our first time doing it, Saturday night. And it got a little hectic in there. The guys had warned me in advance, and I was okay, through most of the third, and then by the fourth, my girlfriend had to pour me a drink, and it started going off the rails. I was struggling.
I don't even want to talk about my bar tab on Saturday, because it was, I mean, the game was almost over, and then it was the overtime. Okay, reopen the tab. We can't watch this without a drink.
Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but I think the chat seemed to enjoy it. They said they brought me to the dark side a bit. So I will not be there this Saturday, guys. That's also part of why I'm doing this. One of my best friends is being inducted to South Carolina's Athletic Hall of Fame. So I'm going to be out there on Thursday. Natasha Hastings, 400-meter runner. Ooh. So I'll be out there for that. And then I'll catch some of the Bama South Carolina game. They scheduled them for homecoming.
Oh, that's sure. Be a sad homecoming.
Not sure who made that call, but yeah.
Mm. It's okay. I think my boyfriend went to Minnesota, and I think they scheduled somebody like Ohio State for their homecoming. So probably similar vein there of why did you pick that weekend? Exactly. But anyways, we got a lot more to talk about. But first, Marcus, you want to tell us about our friends over at Duck Camp?
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. Duck Camp makes gears for folk who live for being out there, whether that's in a duck blind at sunrise or on the 40 acres for a Saturday kickoff. Born right here in Austin, Duck Camp builds best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel that works as well for a full day in the field as it does for a long day of tailgating. From sun protection shirts that keep you cool during those early season scorchers to their iconic game series hats that feel like instant classics, Duck Camp gear is ready for football season, hunting season, and every season in between. So get out there, stay out there, and hook 'em. Shop Duck Camp at duckcamp.com.
All right, guys, make sure y'all get in your questions. We'll answer some of those here shortly. But first, I think one of the biggest things I've seen on social media, and we heard about this in the Steve Sarkisian press conference, is his play calling duties. And if he would ever give them up to and hire an offensive coordinator to call those plays. He responded to this saying he was hired for this. And so that's what he's going to do.
I got hired. I was a really good offensive coordinator. So I believe in what we're able to do. Every year we have to continually evolve, and there's years we're going to be better on offense than we are on defense. There's going to be years we're better on defense than we are on offense, but it's like if I was the best outside sales guy and then I had a startup company, surely I'm going to go to the sales meetings if I'm trying to sell something, right? And so if that's one of your strengths, I'm always going to tap into the strength that I have. And I think, being a play caller on offense is one of my strengths. Some may disagree. That's okay.
So with this, I think I've seen a lot of parallels to similar coaches who opted to give up their play calling duties and then went on to win national champions. I think Ryan Day was one of those. And then other coaches who refused to give up their play calling duties and ended up like Jimbo Fisher. So, I mean, obviously you can look at those parallels. This is a different situation. This is a different coach. It's not going to go exactly the same. But do you think it's to Sarkisian's detriment that he is, being a little stubborn here? It's obviously he did a good job at calling some plays at Alabama or he wouldn't have gotten hired. But obviously there's something that's a bit off right now with some of the plays that have been called.
Yeah.
Go ahead, CJ. I'll follow after you on this one.
I was punting to you, but no. Here's my thing with Sark in the play calling. Unless you can definitively find someone who is a better play caller than Steve Sarkisian, you're going to keep him. He's going to be your guy, and that's going to be his decision. That's going to be Chris Del Conte's decision. It's going to be everybody involved in the Texas administration to say this is our guy as the play caller. And it's one of those things with play callers. Here comes a lot of pride because in a way it's you playing chess versus another grown man and their 11 pieces on the board. And if you can outsmart them, hey, that's what gives you a lot of confidence and a lot of reason to think that you're going to be really good. But Daniel, to your point, Sark does need to get better. And, we've talked about it. Texas for the last two-ish years has had a championship level defense. And it's been the offense that has dragged it back, right? It's lagged behind pretty consistently. Now, my thing is with Sark and its play calling, how much of it is this year specifically the personnel, and how much of it was last year the personnel? And if you're going to be the head coach, you and your general manager need to work hand in hand to make sure that you're recruiting towards the scheme and not just what you think is going to be a good player, right? Texas had 4 guys on an offensive line a year ago end up going to the NFL, 3 drafted, 1 undrafted free agent. They played a lot of football together.
Mm-hmm.
They still didn't have necessarily a offensive line that could sit there and move a lot of people up front. On top of that, they didn't have a quarterback that was great at moving around in the pocket, maneuvering around when things got hectic or creating with his legs. That's not Sark's fault, right? But you got to make sure that if you are going to call plays, it's to the strength of your team. Now, again, is there a better option right now than Steve Sarkisian on the staff? Absolutely not. A.J. Milwauee's been with Texas for 5 years. He's never called plays. Kyle Flood's been with Texas for 5 years. He was the head coach at Rutgers. He did not call plays. There's not a piece right now that can definitively give you a better option on a Saturday than what Sarkisian can. And I don't see that changing. I know folks point to Neil Brown as well. He can't wear a headset unless someone is fired and he takes their place. So it's tough. You're between a rock and a hard place because, one, you're working with, you're trying to make chicken salad right now. Y'all know the saying. Yeah. And you just can't with the ingredients that you have currently. And if that was not the case, this wouldn't be a conversation.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, CJ, and look, this is where I get in the wars in the chat all the time with the fans, right? I understand some of the frustrations. And then on the flip side of that, I think about, having been in locker rooms and around different coaches and stuff, at some point you begin to realize, like, what we have here is what we have. So to your point, CJ, I understand the question, right? I get it. But in theory, if he were to say, yeah, I thought about it, again, who are you turning it over to? You're not doing that in the middle of the season. You're not doing that, in game, what are we at, 8, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. Realistically, it's not. Same thing, we can bang the table all you want about what you should have done in the portal. Sure. Okay, let's say there's validity to that and it's 100% true. Well, it didn't happen. And it can't happen until January. So now you have to do something about it. And, again, when we talk about his play calling, I think what I've kind of started to come around to is sometimes for me, it's not always about the play calls themselves. It's more about the timing of them. Again, not sticking with the run in certain situations. Because when you look, and I'm not trying to, beat this to death here. It's just, I'm seeing guys schemed open every single game, and not just 1 or 2 plays and not just 1 or 2 guys, but multiple. Yeah. And there are opportunities for them to hit that. Now, it's a combination of, is that on Arch? Is that on the offensive line? Is it both? But I mean, I see guys schemed wide open all the time. And if you hit them, or if you give them enough time to hit them in stride, they're still running right now. And then some of these conversations and some of the yardage totals and some of the confidence, right, of the entire team is entirely different. So for me, it's hard for me to sit here and say Sark shouldn't be calling plays because I'm watching him call them. Now, it's absolutely fair to question the timing of some of them. And it sounds like, he's fully aware of these things. I've said it a million times. And I think, we sometimes just forget, like, this is how he eats. This is how he feeds his family. He's not going out there and trying to stink it up. No different than these players. they want to do well. And so some of this is still a maturation process, even for Sark. I don't care how much he's getting paid. You don't just automatically figure it out. It took Kirby a little while, right? It takes different people at their specialty to find that sweet spot where they're really humming. And he's still trying to do versions of that. So, yeah, I get that we're this far in the season and it's frustrating, right? I completely understand that. But we have what we have to work with at this point. You're not going to see someone calling other plays right now. You're not going to go grab somebody out the portal to fix something on the line right now. That's something that people just have to accept and then, readjust your expectations a bit and just see how we go game to game. I know that's a frustrating concept and something none of us really want to do. But Rod has a phrase that talks a bit about what you want to be versus what you have to be, and I think that's kind of where we are right now. For me, it becomes a bit redundant to just kind of keep posing the hypotheticals that aren't really going to change midseason.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck in a circle right now, right? It starts with the play call. Play call fails because your offensive line can't block. Your offensive line can't block. Your quarterback's confidence dwindles. Your quarterback starts dirting balls because he's thinking he's going to get hit all the time. Your wide receivers aren't running routes because they can't think that the ball is going to get to them. The wide receiver drops the ball. The play fails. We're back to the play caller getting the blame because everything right now is a mess. It's frustrating. And to your point, Marcus, 8 weeks in now, and we're sitting there saying, what's the deal?
Yeah.
What is probably most frustrating is knowing that there were 7 months since the conclusion of last year where Texas had a chance to maybe get some portal additions. And, in hindsight, obviously we can sit here and say they probably should have, but that's probably, to me, you're Texas. There's no reason for you to ever lack talent at any point, especially in the NIL era today. That to me is the biggest whiff on anything, more than play calling, more than anything that we're seeing today, is that they didn't equip themselves with the adequate talent, depth, whatever you want to call it, on the offense side of the ball right now.
Sark is great, but he was an OC. Saban can't overrule him. Same thing in ATL. Do you think that this is relevant in this situation with Steve? Thanks so much for this.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where to fully go with the comparison of that at Texas necessarily, because I promise you Nick Saban could have overridden anything he wanted to override.
You see him yelling at Kiffin, right?
Yeah, like I don't really buy that. And an NFL coach, more times than not, if he really feels a way about something, he's going to make sure that offensive coordinator knows it. So I don't entirely agree with that statement, and I'm not sure how we apply it here. But listen, I think there is an argument to be had again in the offseason, in my opinion, of if you're a play caller and a head coach, is there just too much going on, right, to be able to sustain that at a high clip continually. But that's what we got right now. So I think we just got to see what changes are implemented, because look, he did say some of this stuff is on him, and I didn't view it as an apology, but if you kind of start down that path, the best apology is change behavior. So it's the hopefulness here that you do see something a little different on Saturday.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a lot more to talk about. Y'all make sure to get your questions in. Just as a reminder, Super Chats to jump to the top of our list. But first, we're going to hear from our friends over at Advanced Pain Care.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
We got a super chat from OG Slingblade. I think this is a good one to remember right now. Can someone remind me of the famous Al Davis quote? I think we're referring to "Just Win, Baby." Is that the one?
Good pull.
Just win, baby.
That's the only one that matters.
Yeah, that was a very ugly win against Kentucky, but I mean, at the end of the day, it hurts a lot less than if it was the other way around. So I think something to at least take from that game. CJ, we got a question for you. Refund this if CJ hasn't watched training day. Have you had any movie watching time?
No, that was the one I was supposed to watch. I haven't yet. I'm sorry. It's going to get back next Monday. I was supposed to have the review for Coach Shipley and Rod, and when I heard that Coach Shipley wasn't available for the show, I said, hey, just like when your teacher's not there for homework, I don't have to do it. So I didn't do it. But I am traveling this weekend to Starkville. That is a long flight. That is really where I get all my sleep for the week, is on planes. But I'll be sure to get it done this weekend. Monday, I'll have the review.
Okay, we'll follow up. We'll hold you to that one. All right, we got a super chat from Matt Hanley. What's y'all's theory on lack of passes to running backs?
I don't know. I've seen a handful. It seems like Arch is, pretty apt to check it down, and some of them are even called for that, especially in kind of third and long situations. A piece of that again goes back to your personnel. You don't have a Jaden Blue back there. I mean, he was a receiver in a running back's body that ran 4.2 something, right? So you don't have that guy, so you're not going to do those same type of things with him. So I think that's a portion of it. But I don't know the numbers, CJ, from 1 year to the next. Maybe you or Amanda have that, or we can grab that from Rod or somebody at some point. But I still see the ball going to backs. It's just
the yak isn't there.
Yeah, you have a different kind of guy that's catching them.
Yep. All right, we got a question from Juan. He needs to talk to John Mateer. I think we're referring to Michael Taaffe here. It is interesting the frequency of thumb injuries that have required surgery at this point in the season. Does anybody know who did the surgery on Taaffe? Did we still shim for that one?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything there, but look, with all these tweeting and typing about how bad this offensive line is, some of us might need some thumb surgery here in a bit.
Yeah, you watching your Mateer highlights instead of your movie reviews you're supposed to be doing.
Oh my, Sandman, come on.
That's hilarious.
I don't think you're ever going to get over these Mateer.
No, I'm definitely not.
Yeah, they're not going to let you off the hook for that one.
That's
can you blame them? Anyways, back to the play calling duties. I think one of the other things that I've seen a lot commented on among the fan base is this really an O-line problem, or should Arch be pulled? Should Arch sit? Similar to how Quinn sat for a little bit against Georgia last year. And is Arch losing confidence, more importantly, in these play calls, because he's getting pulverized on a lot of these plays, as we have seen. But in the press conference on Monday, he said he still has confidence in his coach, which is at least good to hear.
I think Arch's confidence is shot, personally.
You got to say what you got to say to the media.
Go ahead.
I think it's interesting. I did really like Sark's. I think somebody asked him, it was either post game or in the Monday presser, about kind of why he hasn't pulled him like he did Quinn. And he gave a really thoughtful answer. And, I didn't necessarily take it as coach speak. He said that he felt that, Quinn at that time against Georgia wasn't really seeing the field well. And when he talked to Arch about some of this, he didn't feel like it was the issue of not seeing it. It was just he wasn't making some of the throws, right? So, again, who am I to determine whether or not he does? But look, Arch is I don't know if it's necessarily all the way shot, obviously, but he's obviously not playing with confidence. And I think if anything, what you see in his demeanor, I was seeing some folks this morning even talking about how, they want him to be more like Diego Pavia. Well, I don't. I want him to be who he is, right? And I think part of what we're seeing is, the real-time progression of somebody that is experiencing a level of scrutiny that we've not seen anybody at this position experience before. And so then when you couple that with not having the success that I'm sure he himself wants to have, missing throws that he knows he's made a million times before, that has to, kind of mess with you a bit. And so I think, again, to your earlier point, CJ, of getting some guys back that can remind him hey, this is still the game you were playing from the time you were a little kid. Have some fun with it. Go out here and just let it rip. We got your back. That was the other thing I really liked about, hearing some of the players, especially even the defensive players, come to his and the entire offense's defense of, hey, we're a team, and this is on all of us. So I don't think, from a standpoint of feeling like, the guys don't believe in him. I think he just has to find some of that belief in himself. And Jerry and I have been saying it. We think it's up here, right? It's between the ears, and that's something that he has to figure out and keep playing through. And he told anybody that would listen, at SEC Media Days that he just wanted to play. He needed to play, and I think some people took that as like a Manning coached answer. I think he was telling us like, I need reps. So.
I tell you, and I've been going to these player availabilities for a while now. There's no one that's faster to get up out of that chair than Arch Manning. And
but didn't he say at SEC Media Day, CJ? He was like, all due respect, I don't want to talk to you guys.
Yeah. He's like, I don't want to be in front of the camera here. I don't want to be fielding these questions. I want to go play football. Mm-hmm. And I think it's unfortunate that the season has gone this way for a number of reasons, right? Obviously. But for Arch specifically, a guy who a lot of the conversation around him has been anything but football. And he's brought that upon himself in absolutely zero way, right? And so that's where it's really unfortunate for him. And I know folks on the outside who don't watch this team, maybe a little fortunately at this point, on a week-to-week basis, right? They're going to look at the result. They're going to look at the poor offensive performances, and they're going to say, yeah, man, it's Manning. We knew from the jump he's overrated. He wasn't what he was supposed to be or what they were claiming him to be. And that's unfortunate because he did find a groove in the second half against Florida. That carried over to Oklahoma. And then we get into Kentucky, and we obviously see Texas doesn't commit to a run game. Kentucky stacks the box. They bring pressure every single play, essentially, and there's no real offensive performance to be had for the Texas Longhorns. And folks are going to, again, from the outside looking in, look at Arch Manning and say, that's the reason, when there's plethora number of reasons as to why that's the case. But that's one thing this weekend that I hope we see more of from Sark is, one, Arch having fun, but two, we've seen some really good throws from Arch Manning when he is out of the pocket and rolling. You know what you don't have to deal with when you're out of the pocket and rolling? A bad offensive line. You don't have to deal with it. Yeah. Throw that offensive line moving left. He bootlegs out right. There you have something. That Texas tried to do that first possession of the game. It was a tipped pass on a flood concept to the boundary. We didn't see a lot of that after that. And I think that's one of those things with Sark where, I don't like duplicating things if they work or if they fail. I got to find something new each time. Well, hey, what your quarterback's really good at right now is throwing out of the pocket. Find ways to make that more of a piece of this offense.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that has to be most damaging as far as confidence goes, and just every time you drop back thinking that next second you're just going to get hit. Mm-hmm. So you're dirting balls, like CJ said. And to follow up on what CJ said, a lot of the people online, they just look at the stats after the game. They look at the one or two dirt throws that Arch made and said, yeah, Arch Manning sucks, without seeing the fact that, if you were playing football and you think you're going to get hit by a 300-pound defender in 0.2 seconds, you're probably going to get a little rattled and you're probably not going to play your best game. Yeah. And not that it's just sitting here making excuses, because there's some of these that he obviously has to be better on. There's some areas he obviously has to improve. But if you have that protection and you're making some of those plays with that protection, there's less attention on the couple misses. There's less, people don't follow that quite as much. So I think that's one of the biggest things about Arch that's, I'm sure, frustrating for him. And just as you see it go on through the game, you can just kind of see his demeanor change a bit throughout the game, which is something you didn't see in OU. But
I think that's an excellent point, Amanda, because, one of the things we talk about a lot, and I was saying this as you were coming on right before the show, you talk a lot about in football, like every single play is a car crash, right? And unfortunately, I was in one yesterday and walked away unscathed, and it's all good, like gonna recover fine and everything's gonna be great. But when I was out driving today, I found myself looking a little bit more, right? Like as I'm coming to an intersection, like I was slowing up a little bit. Well, there's an element of that to football when you don't have the confidence that you're going to get the time to throw it, right? Or, to both of your point around his confidence. All right, well, I've made this throw a million times before, and I just can't seem to hit it regularly anymore. Like you start to begin to question yourself. And in football, as much it is a game about intelligence and having an understanding, most of that is throughout the week. By the time you get to the game, you need to be able to let it rip. And when you're thinking, your process doesn't, really follow what you've been coached to do, what you've trained to do, and you begin to make mistakes, right? You can't hesitate. You can't, second guess yourself. And so all of these things, work in concert with one another where, it just kind of becomes a perfect storm of issues at times. So, I think that's a great point that, if you don't feel the confidence of having that protection or just, even begin to question yourself a bit, it makes everything tougher. So, I think it's something you certainly have to be mindful of.
All right, we'll get to some more of your questions. First, we'll hear from one of our sponsors, Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some good news. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders, serving the Austin and Round Rock area and all of Texas, is the only insurance agent you need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. If you're looking for someone local to the Austin, Round Rock area and all of Texas, give him a call at 512-218-8571. We got a question here from Freshwater Cajun. Is it naive to think Sark should know what our offense can do well and what they can't? I mean, I feel like that's something that's popped up a lot because you think in practice, this offense is playing against one of the best defenses in the country. So why is it the case that this offense just cannot be successful when they are going up against one of the best defenses in the country when they're in practice?
Yeah. Bloody Tuesdays, I'm not sure how much of that they're still running through. That was a big point last year. An offensive line that, one, could hold its own water against that front seven, and two, probably a little deeper last year than this year, right? Nato is obviously not going to see the field this year. Connor Stroh's dinged up. Cole Hudson's dinged up. Obviously, you don't have Andre Kojo. So there's four guys right now that you can no longer use to go up against a good defense to really get a look for a Nick Brooks or a Connor Robertson outside of scout. And that's unfortunate. I know Texas will try to do inside hole and whatnot as much as they can. But, again, you're pretty limited in that regard. The thing for me this year, and to Freshwater Cajun's point, this kind of goes back to what Sark needs to do versus what he wants to do. And I think there's a little bit of, I can get away with this offense. And to his point, he's probably right. He probably should assume that his offense can complete an underneath crosser or a slant route. But we know now that maybe it's a little bit more difficult than what we anticipated coming into the season. So it's all about adjustments. And look, if Sark says this offense is going to look completely different on a different, on this week, I have to believe him because to this point, he's been pretty true to what he subtly hints at when it comes to press conferences and kind of dropping seeds for what's ahead.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily naive, to think that he should know that, right? But it's exactly what you mentioned. There's certain things that you believe your offense can do. There's things that throughout the offseason, maybe they've shown that they have a propensity to be better at. And then life happens and football happens and stuff starts to change. And now what you thought maybe for several months could potentially be a strength no longer is, right? And so you begin to have to try to morph and try to figure it out. And I think, again, that goes back to my, really my only true criticism of the play calling, if you will, is some of the timing of some of it. And so for me, I would like to think he knows his personnel at this point well enough to know, all right, these are the situations I should put them in. And so, again, it was refreshing to hear him say, I should have put them in a better situation. And this is how I could have done that. So, the proof will be in the pudding come Saturday to see if he, in fact, does put them in some better positions and situations. And then they respond by executing in those positions and situations.
Got another good question here from Shivam Patel. Hey, you guys, are you surprised we didn't see James Simon last weekend? And will we see more of him for this game? I think if CJ Baxter's back, I think we'd probably not see as much as James Simon.
Yeah, I would assume probably not. And again, this kind of goes back to that Jonah Williams conversation of, for these young guys, if we haven't seen you yet, it's hard, given Texas, again, relatively speaking, is healthy offensively, or at least getting healthier at certain positions. So for James Simon, I was a little surprised. You need some sort of juice, a guy that can create his own. And I think in those first 3 games, the non-conference games, you sat around and you said, it wasn't perfect with James Simon, but there was something there. There's a little juice when he had the ball. And Texas, Lord knows, they need all the juice they can get in the run game. I was surprised we didn't see him, but I think, again, to the point, if we haven't seen him, why would I think it's all of a sudden going to change?
One of the things that I always think about too, CJ and Amanda, is like, we don't know what is happening in practice, right? So when you're talking about the defense that they're going against, typically in season, it's not a ton of 1s versus 1s, right? Like on occasion, you might get some 1s versus 2s, and then you're doing a lot of work on scout team, getting ready for the opponent. And I recall like at times where, on some of our best teams, coach started finally trusting some of those younger players to play. They were absolutely killing the scout team, which was a top 5 defense more years than not, or they were absolutely, just wreaking havoc on the offense. And so it's possible that maybe these players are progressing at the right clip, but that's not happening. And so if you don't just completely jump off of the screen, again, am I going to put James Simon in and take Trey Wisner off the field? More than likely, especially in crucial situations, you're probably not going to do that. So I don't think it's a indictment against Simon and his future. It just may be part of his progression at this point.
That's a great point.
We'll have time to get to a couple more of your questions, but first we're going to hear from our sponsor, Andy Ludicky. Stuck in the corporate rat race with 2 weeks PTO and no control over the money you can make or your schedule in general, call Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. He will take you through a process to identify a business that will fit not only your financial goals, but also your skill set. Franchise ownership isn't for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your destiny, call Andy or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. We got time for a couple more questions, so make sure you get those in. Super chats do jump to the top of our list. We got one from Lonnie. Appreciate what you do. Thank you so much, Lonnie.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you for tuning in. And I think this is a really good question going into this week. How does he take that pressure off himself? Referring to Arch Manning. I mean, I don't know. How do you take the kind of pressure he has from the national media, from this level of a fan base, with the name Manning and Texas on your jersey? I can't really imagine quite as much pressure. I think he does look to his teammates for a lot of that.
Yeah.
And also staying off of the internet, which I think is a good idea for him. Yeah. But I don't know what you guys think.
All right. Not this. No. Not the answer. But for Arch, look, I think it's starting quickly, and that's obviously tough given what we're talking about. But this goes hand in hand with some of the play calls. And Marcus, your point of timing is Texas had a chance. They were moving the ball all right, maybe the best of its entire game in that first opening possession. You get to a 3rd and short, and you decide to go double reverse trick play. And you're sitting there saying, oh, maybe that was a play call that you save for 4-down territory closer to to midfield when you're going to be in a range to go 4th and 4th down. But on your own 38, you can't do that. So you're sitting around saying, all right, like you had some momentum a little bit maybe to start. For Arch, it's all about starting quickly, not just as an offense, but for himself. And I think the best way to do that is just saying, hey, hit the gimmies. Those layups are there for a reason. Find a way. And, it's when a basketball player is struggling. Sometimes getting to the free throw line and just seeing one go through the hoop is all you need for that next jump shot. And, I mean, right now he's looking like Shaq at the free throw line. And that's not what this offense needs, because they need that confidence. They need him to be able to hit the gimmies and hit the layups. And they go hand in hand, essentially.
Yeah, a lot of it too is like, it all sounds cliche when you talk about it. So I know sometimes, like as a fan, it can maybe be frustrating to hear, but it really is about like your fundamentals. Like you just get back to basics. And I think what happens, we talked about this leading up to the game with respect to Kentucky. And, their quarterback, that if you can get him behind the chains a bit, he begins to press and he'll give you a turnover or two. And that happened in those situations, right? Mm-hmm. Well, most quarterbacks are kind of wired that way. If you get them a little bit behind, and especially for guys that, to some degree, I kind of consider like a gunslinger, somebody that, likes to, be a bit fiery and take a couple of risks here and there. If things get off schedule a bit, they sometimes take it upon themselves to feel like they have to be the ones to do everything. And so sometimes when you see some of these gimme plays, the layups, if you will, and you go back and watch the tape, Arch is sometimes overstriding, right? Or he's tapping his feet a couple of times instead of just, driving and ripping it. And so I think it gives him an opportunity to alleviate some of this pressure from himself if he just reminds himself he doesn't have to be Superman. And again, I know we're harping on it quite a bit, but I think it's important to have a guy like a CJ Baxter, to have a guy like a Trey Wisner, to remind him, like, bro, just be you. Like, you don't have to be the persona that everybody says you have to be. Just be who you are right now in this moment, and you can build from that. So, a lot of it is on him, but I do think, he has the teammates to continue to lift him up, and certainly avoid all the social media stuff, because for every one person that is extolling him and backing him up, you got plenty more that just kind of love to see the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We got a super chat from Landon here. Thanks so much. The fact that some Texas fans want Sark to hand over play calling duties just makes me shake my head. I can't stand how reactionary our fan base gets. And I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with the second half of that. I think we've all been guilty of it at some point, of being a little bit reactionary to some things. But it is, I mean, it's a very, very reactionary fan base right now. I think going back to what we've said previously, a lot of it, it's just fan base has gotten used to a positive progression year after year under Sark.
Yeah.
And that there's obviously some level of regression this year because you have 2 more losses than you did at this point last season. So,
yeah, I think that's a great point. And, the passion is what makes college football so fun. The rivalries, the traditions, that's all great, but it's, living and dying. And the minute that your coach has an opportunity to be fired, you're on fly to where, checking to see what planes are coming in and out of your city. Yeah. And I think that's fun, right? I was talking to producer Matthew. We've been checking some flights in and out of Tallahassee, right? In Gainesville, and trying to make sure we know, what might just be happening. And it's fun, as you mentioned, Amanda, hating from outside or afar and seeing the chaos. But, when it's your team, it's not as fun. And so you want those immediate results and that satisfaction that, you were anticipating coming into the year. And sometimes you expect the flowers to bloom before they've been given any type of sunlight. And that's, how you basically kill a garden. And again, Texas had a good looking garden a few years ago, even last year. And right now, I think the seeds are still planted for that garden to bloom when given the right treatment. And right now, to your point, it's probably not given the right treatment.
Yeah. It's tough. I forget it and I say it and then I forget it, but fan is short for fanatic, right? So elements of this aren't really supposed to follow logic at times. And, when you direct the ire towards, coaches, I can handle that a little bit better. I'm not suggesting you coddle, players necessarily, but at the same time, I don't care how much they're getting paid. They're still 18 to 22-year-olds. And if anything, having some of that money in their pocket is probably even more of a challenge. I can imagine what some of us would have been doing if we had that, at that point in time in our lives. And I think, it's just a way you can go about it. I was kind of going back and forth with somebody on Twitter today, and it was just like, there's a way you can provide constructive criticism and your perspective without like being crass and disrespectful. And that's where I get a little frustrated because, then the player in me kicks back in and it's kind of like, okay, would you say that to his face?
Yeah.
Would you say it to my face? More than likely not. And so if that's the case, then those are the things you kind of got to look at yourself a bit and say, all right, what's the point here? But if you want to engage in like a real discourse, we can do that. But we get it, social media, and I can't remember who it was that tweeted something out today about, where he saw us in the rankings. And it's like, come on, man, like you're just farming for clicks here. Like if you talk about Texas, people are going to gravitate to it. And if that's where you want to live, so be it. That's just not, kind of my jam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Amanda, I know you saw that tweet too.
Yeah, I did. I did a little quote tweet on that one too. I mean, he was just wrong. He was saying there's unranked teams who have beat top 15 teams. What was OU ranked when Texas beat OU?
He typically is wrong.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you're wrong as long as it gets engagement for a lot of people. But, it's how it goes. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us for this Longhorn live stream. Big weekend ahead. Hopefully with a Longhorn win on the road coming up. A lot more to talk about before then. We'll be back here same time tomorrow. And make sure you tune into Coffee and Football in the morning. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Marcus. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Fun. But for this Longhorn live stream, I'm Amanda Atwell. That's CJ Vogel and Marcus Myers. Hook 'em horns, and y'all have a great night.
You're the man, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.